Star Wars fans can't wait for the Ahsoka series to release, and now leaks have surfaced online regarding the season final. Brace yourselves for this one because they could also be setting up the Dave Filoni movie coming in 2026.
As heir to the Empire.
However, they also leave our heroes in a very bad place.
We are no Jedi.
Let's start by going through the leaks, and then we'll get into what they tell us about the rest of the show and what it means for the Star Wars stories that are to follow, because the story that's about to unfold in Ahsoka will bring around the greatest threat to the galaxy since Emperor Palpatine. But before we get carried away with any speculation, we'll get into that later, we need to talk about these leaks. And if you've been keeping up to date with all the previous Ahsoka leaks, some of these you will recognise. Although this time around they're far more polished and they seem to fit in better with what we already know about the story. Now, from what I've managed to work out so far, it seems Ahsoka will slowly introduce us to more characters as the season progresses. They won't be dumped on us all at once. In the first episode, and it's expected because it is the Ahsoka show, we're going to focus mainly on Ahsoka, perhaps showing the general audience who haven't seen the Clone Wars and Rebels just who this character is, whilst also introducing us to new characters on the other side of the conflict such as Baylan and Shin. Hera seems to be a part of the story from pretty early on, with episode 2 really acting as the episode that unites Ahsoka and Sabine once again as they set off on a journey to find Ezra, which, as we all know, will ultimately lead them to Thrawn. From what I've heard about the show's structure, and take this with a pinch of salt as things can change, is that the season will likely be structured in 2 parts. The first part focusing mainly on the New Republic side of things, and likely their response to the Imperial remnants, and that will effectively carry on the story that we started in The Mandalorian Season 3 with Carson Teva, whilst the second part of the show will focus on Ahsoka and Sabine's quest to find Ezra in the unknown regions. And of course, in turn, that will then lead into Thrawn. But of course, in between all of this, we'll also follow Ahsoka on her own personal journey to overcome her past. Being the former Padawan of Anakin Skywalker, she largely blames herself to some degree on Anakin's fall to the dark side, which of course led to the rise of the Empire in the first place. Now, we've heard previously, and these new leaks pretty much back up the fact that Thrawn does return to the galaxy, and he's going to have an army of undead stormtroopers, and of course he's going to be accompanied this time around by fallen Jedi Baylan Skoll and his apprentice Shin Hati. Now, we've seen some of this play out in the trailers already. Now, the season final, which we're mostly going to focus on today, these leaks originally come from Making Star Wars and they've been reposted by Bespin Bulletin. But it talks of Morgan Elsbeth building a large vessel to go and locate Thrawn in this unknown part of the galaxy that we've never explored before. Now, this vessel, I believe, is what we see in the trailer, this gold ship. In one of the teaser clips, we see Morgan Elsbeth aboard it, looking out of the window. And then in other parts of the trailer, we see Thrawn standing on that same ship. So I believe this gold vessel is the one that Morgan Elsbeth is constructing to go to these unknown locations in search of Thrawn. Now, up to the point of where we are in the Ahsoka series, Thrawn has been trapped in this unknown location, which apparently could be a new galaxy that we've never explored before, or just an unknown, unexplored portion of the galaxy we're in at the moment. He's been stuck there for years, ever since the season final of Rebels. That really was the last time he was physically involved in a conflict. Now, what the Ahsoka series seems to be setting up here is effectively a race between the good guys and the bad guys to locate Thrawn. Now, this gives me the Force Awakens vibes, where you have the Resistance and the First Order both searching for Luke Skywalker, and really the first one to get to him wins. It seems very much like that in the Ahsoka series, apart from if the bad guys find the person they're searching for first of all, this time around it's going to benefit them rather than them trying to kill him. Thrawn really is seen as the key to unlock the Empire once again. Now, the report goes on to say that Ezra and Thrawn, despite being separated and missing from the known galaxy for a number of years now, are still in the same location as one another, although I very much doubt they're going to be hanging out as buddies, and I doubt one of them's got the other one captured and held prisoner. So what the likely situation here is, they both arrived at this final destination where they are now and went their separate ways, but they're still in the same proximity as one another. Now, this does immediately give me visions of Castaway, where you're on a desert island, but instead Thrawn and Ezra are so sick at the sight of one another, they decide to stay apart. And I doubt it would be a desert island. It would probably be over the distance of a planet or even a galaxy. Now, one really interesting aspect of this article is that it mentions that Thrawn is still actually operating from the shadows. So does that effectively mean he has some form of communication with the Shadow Council and is remotely controlling the Imperial remnants scattered around the known galaxy. The thought of Thrawn being able to contact the remnants could explain a lot in the overall story if that turns out to be true, which we'll come on to in a moment. But fast forward the overall story now and we land towards the season final, but both sides, it turns out, are successful in locating, that's the first main obstacle they have to overcome, and then travelling to the location where Thrawn and Ezra are in this unknown part of the galaxy. Both sides effectively accomplished the first part of their missions. Now Thrawn, and this comes from an earlier report and it's also backed up in the new one, is said to have an army of undead stormtroopers accompanying him. Now these are likely the same stormtroopers that are on board the ship that disappeared with him, Ezra and the Purgils. Now Ezra, on the other hand, at this point is proficient in a form of Force martial arts. That's something we haven't really seen too much of in Star Wars, although you can see elements when certain Force users use the Force to fight rather than their sabers. Now that does bring up the question, will Ezra then go on to wield a lightsaber again, or has he moved beyond that? Some of the most powerful Jedi and Force users decided they didn't need to use a lightsaber. Look at Emperor Palpatine and Yoda at one point as well. Now I do think Ezra is likely to construct his own lightsaber. He's going to need one with the fight that's about to break out, and I don't think he's going to get the one that Sabine has back, as she's already made modifications to it and it's very much now being marketed as Sabine Wren's lightsaber. Now essentially when it comes down to the main point of their mission, which is to stop Thrawn returning to the galaxy, Ezra really seems to come secondary to that because he's effectively looking after himself. The season final sees Thrawn return once and for all, which means Ahsoka and Sabine have failed. And this is said to be one of the final scenes. We see Thrawn exit that ship, or what I'll assume is that gold ship we see him travelling in, the one that Morgan Elsbeth constructed to go find him. He exits the ship and is met by his forces standing before him. Now you can just picture The Force Awakens here, where you've got Hux standing in front of all them stormtroopers on Starkiller Base. Could be like a smaller scale version of that, or one of the countless times the Emperor left the Imperial shuttle with troopers standing either side of him as he makes his way out. But an interesting point here is that the fallen Jedi Baylan is also a part of this party that greets Thrawn. Now, I originally speculated that Baylan would unfortunately be killed off, and my reasoning behind that was because unfortunately the actor Ray Stevenson did pass away a few months ago, and we haven't really heard too much about a potential recast or anything like that for this Dave Filoni movie, or even The Mandalorian Season 4, which led me to believe that perhaps Baylan meets his demise in the Ahsoka show, but apparently this is not the case. He's around in the final scene, and so is Shin Hati, his apprentice, and Morgan Elsbeth, and also Enoch, which is Thrawn's gold-faced right-hand man. Now, of all of these undoubtedly powerful characters and the Imperial army greeting Thrawn, it just stands to show the viewers that are watching the show just how much of a threat Thrawn now has at his disposal. And I can bet my bottom dollar this army or this military or this party that's awaiting Thrawn's arrival is much larger in size than you're speculating in your mind right now. You see, the Imperial remnants have been working to rebuild in the shadows. They're just appearing as fractured on the surface, and they're all very much still working together. And that's evidenced when Moff Gideon is able to request Praetorian guards in The Mandalorian Season 3 from another Imperial remnant. So unless there's any other characters that are going to play a big role in the Ahsoka show that we haven't heard of just yet, it seems that no main antagonists are going to be killed off in this show. But as I say, there could be some that are yet to be announced that do get killed off. But the ones we know of so far, they all seem to see it through. Now, these reports very much give me an overall Empire Strikes Back kind of vibe with the Mandoverse. Every show up until now really has left on a positive note, with the heroes achieving some kind of victory. And yes, you could say if Ahsoka and Sabine have found Ezra, that could be seen as a victory, but ultimately it is a failure because they didn't stop Thrawn. And it very much looks like the Empire is on the front foot once again, with the Republic and the Military Disarmament Act leaving them vulnerable, now open to attack. And we finally finish off the show, according to these reports, with Thrawn promising a reckoning is on the way. Now, this all ties in to Dave Filoni's movie very nicely, in my opinion. But of course, we've got the situation of a couple more shows coming before we get to that point. Now, we still have Skeleton Crew and The Mandalorian Season 4 to come out before 2026, and I'm not too sure how these two shows are going to fit in, particularly Skeleton Crew, other than really introducing more allies for the good guys. Although, to be honest with you, we don't know all that much about Skeleton Crew so far, so I could be wrong there, and it could actually be a really important part of the overall story. The Mandalorian Season 4, on the other hand, I wouldn't be surprised if it largely approaches the build-up to Dave Filoni's movie in the same period as the Ahsoka show, but from Din and Grogu's perspective alongside Carson Teva. Now, there were rumours a while ago that a possible Ahsoka Season 2 was on the cards, and while it is possible that there is still a story to be had with Ahsoka, Sabine and Ezra between now and the Filoni movie, they could potentially still be stuck in this unknown part of the galaxy. We haven't heard anything on their return, whereas Thrawn we have. There's definitely a story there to be had if they are stuck there at the end of the season. But due to the ongoing writer strikes and director strikes, and the movie's release window of 2026, I really do doubt we're going to get an Ahsoka Season 2 at this stage. So far, the remaining Mandoverse shows, Skeleton Crew and Mando Season 4, are the only ones we have lined up. There's nothing announced past them. There is the possibility that an Ahsoka Season 2 could come after the events of the movie, or perhaps the movie could be delayed with the ongoing strikes, giving time for them to fit in a Season 2 as well. So in terms of where the Ahsoka show fits with the overall story, it really seems to set up the movie, but there could be more to it than that with more shows on the way and the potential of a Season 2 and of course these delays holding things up. One of the most interesting elements of this report for me has to be Thrawn's contact with the Empire. If that is indeed true, it explains how they were able to locate where he was in the first place and bring him back into the fold. But what's more, to hear that he is accompanied by undead stormtroopers in this location, which, according to previous reports, is due to Night Sister magic over there. Is this why Morgan Elsbeth is leading the charge to find Thrawn, because she is actually a Night Sister, and perhaps she even has ties with the Night Sisters that are at Thrawn's location herself? And something that could further back this up is actually in the trailer when the star map is summoned. Part of it comes from the magic that Elsbeth is using, but the other part comes from the ruins surrounding them. They're two different colours. So my thoughts around this are they're actually summoning that star map at an ancient Night Sister site, and her power is needed to access the forgotten knowledge. Now, with the show seemingly heading to a defeat for the heroes, it's really acting as an introduction, I feel, to the much larger story that's about to be told. Let's not forget, the Thrawn trilogy of books is a trilogy, and if Dave Filoni is really adapting the heir to the Empire, that could only be the first part of 3 movies. If we look back at The Empire Strikes Back and Revenge of the Sith, 2 of the more darker Star Wars movies there are, they both result in the heroes being defeated effectively for a time. They're 2 of the most popular Star Wars movies as well. Now, perhaps Ahsoka is about to follow suit on that. But before we wrap up here, guys, I will say this report comes from a very reliable place, and a lot of elements mentioned here have been mentioned before. But with the amount of time that's passed since the initial report, which was towards the beginning of the year, it's possible that there has been reshoots and some shuffling around and changes made, as was rumoured with the Mandalorian Season 3 final with Boba Fett and crazy reveals with a Mythosaur. Now, there is no indication as of now that these leaks have been reconfirmed, but that being said, I like the sound of the final. If it does play out like this, I think it'll be a refreshing change, having the villains take the lead going into the next project as well. How do you guys feel about this reported ending? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe if you're new. I am off on my travels tomorrow, but I will definitely be reading your comments while I'm sitting on the beach. Catch you in the next one, guys. May the Force be with you.